So what I'd like to do now is just do a little bit of tutorial 2, just to teach you about conditional statements. And after that, we're going to break to do some projects of our own. So you've got your car, you've got your wheel. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a road for my car to go on. And this is going to be a little bit different than normal drawing, because if I bring up the paint palette, don't do this, but just watch. If I bring up the paint palette, you notice there's a white area that shows the space that I have available for painting, and outside of that, my brush doesn't work. So I don't want a little road in here. I really want the whole background to be painted. Furthermore, if I paint something in here, like there's my road, it really isn't a road. It's sort of this little object which can snake around and, doesn't behave like a road, except during an earthquake, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the background. And the background, which is called the world, is like any other object. You can right-click on it, and you get this halo all the way around the outside. And there's a little gray icon, which is the paint icon. And you'll see that for the other objects that you create as well. That's how you go back and change their painting. So if I click on that, now I've got the entire world available for painting. So I'm going to just go ahead and paint a road stretching from one end, kind of curvy. And I'm going to make it wide enough. I can always, for my car to go on, but I can always adjust the car size, of course. Okay, so I've drawn a road and I'm going to keep it. And so why don't you go ahead and do that?
You always need to remember to keep what you're doing.
Okay, so now that you've got a road, you can try to drive on the road. You can start your, whoa, too fast for me. It drove right through it. That's a problem. So if I had a game and the goal was to get to the end in a hurry, this would be the best strategy. Right? Just to ignore the road. And so what I'd like to do is create a way to keep the car from leaving the road. And the way we can do this is with a conditional test. I'm going to resize my car a little bit. There we go. Well, no, I think it's more proportion now, right? Okay. So here's how to make a conditional test. If you click on the script header at the top of the script header, there's this little box from which you can pull tiles, and at the very top of that menu is a test yes no tile. So grab that and put it in your script. And so it says test yes no. And if you've programmed before, this is like an if then else statement. This lets you execute a command only when a certain condition is true, and if it's not true, then to do something else. And what we'd like to do is program it so that if the car happens to see the side of the road, then it does something which keeps it from going forward. Okay, so I'm going to look at the viewer for the car. And notice that there's a category down here near the bottom called tests. Now, if I didn't have that, where would I find it? Well, each of these little window panes can hold any of a number of different tiles, and there's different categories of tiles. There's one category called tests. But you can always also just click on something under the search command, and we'll find tiles with those words in it. In any case, for the tests, for this test of interest, what we're going to use is the color sees test, which is a really commonly used test. It's a way to check whether a particular color of the object is touching some other color, in the world, or of some other object. So I'm going to grab that, cars color sees color and put it right next to the word test. And it needs to turn green before I drop it. And what's important here is the tip of the cursor. So when the tip of the cursor is to the right of the word test, it will turn green, and then I can let it go, and it clicks into place. And what this is saying is, test whether the car's red color sees the red color. And I need to change these so that they make sense. I want to change the first color to a color of the car, and the second color to the color of the road. And even if I drew red on the side of the road as my road edges, it probably wouldn't be the same red. It would probably be a slightly different red. So I'm going to have to do this no matter what. And so I'm going to click here where it says car's red color, and I get an eyedropper, and I just go and choose that part of the car I'm interested in. So I think I'll look at one of the wheels. So now if the car is black color, the wheel, the tire, sees this pink color, then what should I do to keep me from going through? I could turn right and go back to the basic category. But what if I was here and I turned right?
You'd want to turn left.
Can we just stop?
You want to bounce off, basically.
Yeah, so we could stop. Well, it turns out that a good thing to do is to just go backward some to counteract the forward by. So under the yes, we could say go forward by something, a negative something which offsets the forward. So maybe, -5, -6, -7. Let's see what happens.
Can you use your XYs?
So how might I use my XYs?
Can you test with those?
I could test what the XY is, except there's this condition happens all over the screen, right? So what X and Y do I want to change? I mean, for what values of X and Y do I want to affect a change? And of what values of X and Y of the car would how would I change the X and the Y of the car? It's unclear depending on which way I was heading, what I wanted to happen to the car's X and Y.
Is it just using RGB color codes beneath? So could you make the lower line just a very slightly different
You guys are way ahead of me.
color?
So you guys are way ahead. So the suggestion to turn by a certain amount when the car hits the side of the road, maybe turn by 5, would work fine to keep it driving on the road, right, when it hits the road in this direction. But if it hits the road in this direction, we don't want it to turn by 5. We want it to turn backwards by -5. And so how do we do that? Well, it was just suggested that I could redraw the road so that the top edge of the road was one color and the bottom edge of the road was a slightly different color, and then check if my tire sees this color, it turns by 5, and if it sees that color, then it turns by -5. Alternatively, I could color the wheels or the tires different colors and check which one is touching. And I would need 2 tests.
Yeah, but here we are using the wheel, so
Yeah, here we're driving on the wheel. We don't have an auto drive script. The goal is to now drive the car. Whoops, I'm stuck. Notice that my back wheel is getting caught up here. So
Use your headlights.
I could use my, go, no.
Well, how did it go through?
it's going so fast.
It's backing up. It's backing up, and when the back tires of the car hit, it backs up. So if I really wanted to engineer this properly, I would want to distinguish between the back tires and the front tires, or use these headlights as sensors and check whether or not the car's yellow headlight sees the pink color. And now, if it backs up, there's not a problem. And probably I won't have that same getting stuck here with my back wheels either. Okay, so go ahead and make this happen. The key point here is that you should learn how to use a conditional test. to get the car, so that you're forced to stay on the road.
Other question I've got is there a way to start the ticking other than a mouse control?
Yes.
Okay, so let's continue with the second tutorial. So now that we know how to do conditional tests, it would be fairly easy, for example, to have a finish line, and when the car hits the finish line, something could happen, right? Because it would just be a matter of checking the colors. Well, one thing that we might want to happen is that the car goes back to its home location, wherever that is. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a little garage to house the car. So go ahead and open up the painting tool and draw a really quick, not particularly attractive home for the car. Oops. There's mine. I'm going to keep that. And I'm going to call it garage. And then put it at the beginning of the track, and size it however you'd like. Okay, so now that you've got a garage, it's okay if it's just a blob. Your car, your wheel, your garage are all going to be blobs. So the question is, how do we make the car go to the garage? So let's open up the car's viewer. And there's a car's X property and a car's Y property that we looked at before, which tells us where the car is. What we'd like to be able to do is to set those values. And any property, that is those tiles that have green and white arrows, can be set by dragging out the tile by the green and white arrow, which gets you what's called an assignment statement. It lets you assign the value of the X. So I'm going to grab by the green and white arrow, and I'm not going to put that in the existing script. I'm going to drop it in, just on the world, and I'll get a new script sprouting, and I'll call that go home. And the question is, what should X be so that the car is at the garage? Well, I could try changing these values, probably something close to 0. The other thing I could do is I could just drag the thing to exactly where I want it to be and then observe, oh, it's 51 in my case. And so I'll change that to say cars X becomes 51. Okay. Yeah, your numbers may be different. And my Y, I want to be 473, which is where it is at this very moment. And my heading, I want to change so that it's pointing in the right direction to start going. So in my case, it's probably something like 50, 55, 60. Now, if you colored in your garage, which we've recommended that you do with all your objects, you might have your garage on top of your car and you won't be able to see it. The trick is that the last object that you click on will be the one that's in front. So you can move the garage, move the car, move the garage back, and then put the car on top. There's also a way to send objects to the back or to the front, but we won't talk about those. Okay, so now notice, if you've got a script like this, that you can move the car anywhere, and if you click on this exclamation mark, the car will go back to exactly where you wanted it with the right orientation. So you might have been driving for a while, and you can just click that exclamation mark, and boom, the car will go back. Okay, now what happens if I run both of these scripts at the same time? So what's going on is the car is trying to go forward and trying to do the drive script, but at the same time, it's constantly being reset to coordinates 51 and 473. So these two scripts are in competition with each other. And if you think about it, there's really no time I would ever want this go home script ticking. It's really something you want to do once, right? It's not a ticker, it's a fire once script. So it's something like, it's a kind of thing that you only want to click on the exclamation mark. Well, it turns out there's a nice way to create a button that does exactly that. If you look up at the upper right of the script header, there's a little black and white menu. If you click on that, you can choose the second option, which is button to fire this script. And if you click on that, it'll give you a button. And be careful before you put it down, because once you put it down, it's kind of hard to move, or at least you need to bring up its halo in order to move it. So put it some reasonable place on your screen. And now, whenever you click that button, the car will go back to your garage.
Where do you find it?
I found the button right here in this little white and black menu, button to fire this script.
If you collapse cargo home or
Okay, now suppose I move my garage. I decide this is where I want my garage to be. If I click on the go home script, oh no, it doesn't go to the garage, right? There's a whole new place I want it to go to. So maybe this is the starting place. I'd like it to go there. So what do I do about that? Well, I could change this X and this Y right here to the location that I want. But in fact, it makes more sense, because I might want to change it later, to simply program it so that it goes to the garage's X and the garage's Y, plus or minus some small amounts to be determined. So if you bring up a viewer for the garage, and you can use garage's X by grabbing the phrase garage's X. Don't grab by the green and white arrow. That's if we want to change the value. If we want to use the value, we just grab by garage's X and put that in place of whatever number you had. Mine was 51. And do the same thing for Y. And now if you click the go home script, it will go to the garage. And if you move the garage and click again it will go. And notice that it's underneath because I keep clicking on the garage. And in fact, if we set this ticking, which normally we don't want to do, we could drag the garage around and the car is following it. Now, this positioning isn't exactly where I'd like it. I think I'd like the car a little bit lower. So I can change this by changing this phrase that says cars Y should become garages Y, but I think I need a little bit of math. And I will subtract maybe 20. Car go home, nope, maybe 25. And let me test that. That looks pretty good. And now if I move this and click on the button.
Does everybody know how the car knows what its X and Y are? Have you told them that?
Oh.
How the X and Y for the car is determined?
Yes, you mean that this is 0, 0 down here?
No. I mean the car itself. What is its location of its X
Yes,
and Y?
the location of its X and Y is exactly where the center of it is. And you can move where that center is by holding shift. But usually it's sort of right in the center of the thing that you drew. But sometimes you may want to move that because that's also the center of rotation. And so, for example, if you wanted a paddle for a pinball game or a hand for a clock, for that matter, you want it rotating off of one of the ends rather than in the middle.
So if I change the center of rotation, will that change where it calculates X and Y from?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, the center of rotation is the center of mass of the object or whatever. Okay, good. All right, so now I've got this. Now it's a simple matter to add a finish line. Oh, notice I've got this thing paused. And I really want to change that to say normal. Scripts that are paused are ones that you intend to start ticking again, and they go between ticking and paused. And you never want really a go home script to be ticking, so set it to normal. And there's only one place where that becomes a factor, and we may talk about that later. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw on my background. How do I do that? Right click on the background, click on the little paint icon, and I'm going to paint maybe a small green finish line, maybe not so small. And I'm going to click keep. And now what I'd like to do is when the car reaches the finish line, I like the car to go back to the garage and stop.
How did you paint on the background? I missed that.
To paint on the background again, I right clicked on the background, and then there's a little gray icon,
Okay.
and you click on that, and then it brings up the paint tool. Okay. All right, so how do I make it so that when the car hits the green, something happens? What do I need in order to do that? I need a test. So I'm going to add a test, which I get from this little box in the script header. And I'll put that at the bottom. Let me move it so we can see it. Whoops. And what kind of a test do I want to do?
Color, see.
Color sees would be good. Good, if it touches the green. So I'm going to bring up a viewer for the car. There's my tests. And I'm going to test, oh, where'd my car go? Oh, it's behind the viewer. I'm going to collapse the viewer. There we go. I'm going to check if the car's yellow headlights, you know, it's easier to pick up that color right from here, sees the green. What do I want to do? Go home. Where do I find a script that makes this happen? Where do I find a command that makes this happen? Well, if I look at the car, there's a category called scripts. One of them is go home. So I can simply take that and put it next to the yes. So that means that when this yellow sees the green, this script will execute once. It's just as if these commands were in place of the phrase car go home. This is a subroutine or a procedure call. And finally, I'd like this thing to stop ticking. So if it's going, oops, let me see if I can make it to the end. Does it work? Yes, it worked. But I want it to stop.
Stay home.
So the way I can stop it is well, you can search for the word stop or pause. So if you search for pause, there is a script, there's a command called pause script, and it says empty script. You'll also find this tile under the scripting category, and that has all sorts of different options. So what I'd like to do is pull out car pause script, empty script, and I'm going to change where it says empty script to the name of the script I want to pause. What is the name of the script I want to pause? Drive. All right, so this gives me options, which are all of the scripts that are available. So these are all of my scripts at the moment. Let's see. And I can set the car home. I can start it ticking. I can drive it. I don't know why I'd want to go around the roundabout, just to show off. And then, boom, the game's over. Okay? Let's pause here for a minute to make sure everyone's caught up.
Okay, raise your hand if you have a question.
Okay, so now that we've got the car game working, basically, it can drive, it can, you can drive it, you can control it with a wheel. When it gets to the end, it stops. We can make it more challenging by creating a property of the car that doesn't exist yet. And we do that by creating a variable. And what we're going to do is create a variable for gas. And we'll start with a full tank of gas, and then as the script ticks away, the gas will deplete. And when the gas gets to 0, then the car will stop and the game will be over. And so it'll be a race to see whether you can make it to the end by the time the gas runs out. And you can set that rate of depletion as you'd like. And you could even make it more interesting by putting little gas cans on the road, which bump up your gas when you hit them. But you could have little oil slicks, which when you hit, make you change to a random direction. Right? So all of these things you know how to do already, right, with color sees tests, except for creating a variable. So that's why we're going to do the gas. So if you click on this very wide-looking V at the top of the viewer for the car, it will create a variable. And variables have different types. The default type is number, so leave that alone and just give the variable a name like gas or whatever it's going to be, whatever it's going to represent. And you can choose a number of decimal places, and you can set that later if you'd like as well. I'm just going to leave it as 0 decimal places. And when you're done, you click accept. And you'll see a new variable has been formed under the category of variables.
Okay, so we have a variable.
Now, what do I do with the gas? Well, one thing I could do is when it goes home, it resets to a healthy amount of gas. So that's kind of like a reset script. So I'm going to grab by the green and white arrow because that's how I assign a value to something rather than dragging by the car's gas word. So I'm going to grab by here. Whoops. Here we go. And I'm going to say car's gas should begin with, I don't know, 500. 500, units of gas. Now here's something that you may want to know about for watching variables. Sometimes you'd like a little monitor or you'd like a score box for a game. You'd like to know what the value is without having to look in the viewer. If you take a variable like or property like car's gas or even the X or the Y, any one of these tiles which has a green and white arrow, if you grab by the value itself and not by the green and white arrow and you drop it on the background, it creates a little watcher which tells you, what the value is, and also lets you change the value. So right now my car has 6 of gas. If I push my go home button, notice that it's now reset to 500. Now how do I make the gas deplete as I'm driving?
Put it in the script for drive.
So in the script for drive, I want to drag what? Car's gas? Like this? Right, so this is not the place to drag from. This is the value. I don't want to look at the value. I want to change the value. So I need to grab by the green arrow, which gives me an assignment statement. And my car's gas should, and I can choose this to say increase by, decrease by, multiply, or just become a particular value. In this case, I want it to decrease by some amount, let's say 1. And how many ticks do I have going? I'm going at 50 ticks a second, so that's probably going to be depleted pretty quickly.
Get decrease by?
I got decrease by clicking I had this little arrow.
Yep.
You need to get your cursor right above it and click on that. And then there's a choice between increase by, decrease by, multiply by, or the arrow. So I'm going to decrease by 1. And if I start this thing going, oh, look how fast my gas is running out. Hurry, hurry.
Uh-huh.
Of course, it really doesn't matter, does it? Why doesn't it matter? Right, because if I run out of gas, unlike real life, I get to keep going. Look, I've got negative 200. I owe a lot of gas. One day it's going to cost me. Oh, but now I've got 500 again. Who cares? All right, so what we need to do then is to put in some kind of a conditional test here, which says, hey, if your gas is 0, then something bad should happen, like the game should stop. So I'm going to create a test. And now this is the first time we're using a test besides color Cs. And this is how you test a value of something. If you go to the viewer for the car, and it's gas that we want to test the value of. So now we'd like to refer to the value. We don't want to assign it. So we just grab the tile that says car's gas and we put it next to the word test. We're going to test the car's gas, and as soon as we let go, it sprouts a little less than 5. So this is testing whether the car's gas is less than 5. I can set it to say less than or equal to, not equal to, greater than equal to, or divisible by. Lots of choices. It turns out better to say less than or equal to than to say equal to, because suppose my gas were decreasing at, say, 2 units a second, or 2 units each tick, and suppose they were currently at, say, 7, then if I'm decreasing by 2, it's going to hit 1, and then it's going to skip over 0 and go to -1. And the condition of when it's 0 will never be triggered. So that's why I'll say less than or equal to 0. So as soon as it is less than or equal to 0, what do I want to do?
Pause script drive.
Pause script drive, exactly. And now,
How did you get pause script drive from?
where did I get pause script drive? It happened to be handy, but you can search for the word pause, and it'll bring up 2 different commands, and the one you want is the one that says pause script.
If it is handy, if I've already put it somewhere else in this script, is there a way to copy it?
Yes.
Okay.
For example, so the question is, can I copy a pause? So notice that I've already got a pause here. If I wanted to get another one, I can right-click on this. But then what do I get?
The whole thing.
I get the whole thing. If I right-click again, what do I get?
Ah.
The test. If I right-click again, what do I get? At some point, I think I get what I wanted. Nope. I've got the yes. Oh, no. Okay, this is not to be done. Now I've got a disembodied yes. But watch this. I can bring up a viewer for the disembodied yes. And I can have the disembodied yes do whatever I want it to do.
What the heck?
But wait, it gets more interesting. I can take this car forward by tile, and while it's in the script, well, maybe not forward by. I don't know what would happen there, but I could have it turning. Okay, so this just shows you that that everything is programmable here. Okay, this is just silliness. Stop. Oh, darn it. That's okay, I can set its heading to 0. Sorry, I got carried away here. All right, and I guess this test is no longer good. So let me recover. Test.
So copying a line is not as easy.
You can copy, yes, you can copy a tile, but you need to,
It's hard to do.
yeah, you need to make sure you're grabbing the right thing. Yes, if you take it out of the script and then copy it, you're much better to be successful. So what do I have going on here? I was testing if the yellow of the car. Sees the green. Then I go home.
What are we doing now, Lenny?
I'm trying to recover. I'm trying to recover from the mess that I made.
What is this test gonna be a test of?
So far,
Hang on one second.
you're gonna have to do
It's like a static.
the gasoline. Get the gasoline.
Right, so, oops. Okay, this is where we were before I got distracted.
Okay.
And so we created this test for cars gas less than or equal to 0, and if so, cars should pause script drive. And so now I can start the drive script going, and if I don't make it in time, notice my gas is going down quickly. Will I make it? I don't know. Who's to say? Oh, it's gonna be, oh no. Okay, so we can play with the values, the initial values, or how quickly things deplete, and make it a challenging game, so that's not too easy and not too hard. Okay, so good. So that's how we use new variables and use them in tests. Now there was one other thing I wanted to add. Well, let me pause for a moment. Okay, just a couple more things to notice, and then we'll be done with this tutorial. If you look in the supplies bin, hello, where's my supplies bin? You'll notice something called all scripts. You can pull this out, and this is a little tool that can be used to stop all scripts and to start running all paused scripts. It doesn't start all scripts running, it just starts running those that have been paused. And that's why you don't want to leave the go home script in a paused state, because then it will start running. So usually the scripts that you're using will either be fire one scripts, which you never have paused, you always have them in normal state, or they'll be ticking and paused scripts, which are meant to be ticking or paused. And so this will let you stop or start. Oops. Why didn't it start?
How do you get a script into the not ticking and not pause state?
The reason it stopped is because I'm out of gas. So I'll go home, and now I can start things, and I can stop them, and I can start them again and stop them. Right, and the way you change the state is you hold down on where it says paused. You could choose normal or paused or ticking and a whole bunch of other things, which is what I wanted to tell you about. So, so leave that script. In fact, you can collapse it if you'd like by clicking on this little circle. It'll make it disappear from the screen, and you can disappear your go home script. If you'd like to get them back again, you simply find their names in the viewer and you pull them out and it will show them to you. Okay, so this way you don't have to have your screen littered with scripts. We're going to create a new script, so drag out car empty script and you'll get a new script, and maybe call this one flee. And we're going to learn two things. One is, so where's empty script? It's under the scripts category. So we're going to learn two things. One is how to use random numbers, and the other is how to get a script to execute when the mouse is over it, when the mouse is over the object. So what Flea is going to do is whenever I mouse over the car is going to jump to a random spot on the screen. Okay, so then the challenge will be to pick it up, I guess. So I'm going to select cars X by the green and white arrow, so I get an assignment statement for cars X and cars Y. And now I'd like to replace these numbers with random numbers, and I can find random numbers in a variety of places, one of which is right here, I believe. And I can get random number, and this will choose a random number between 1 and whatever is showing. So I'm going to replace the actual constant that's there with random, and I guess I'd like it to choose a random number up to 400 because that's how wide the screen is. And I'll do the same thing for the Y.
That's much wider than 400.
Oh, sorry, yes, it's much wider than 400. I'm in a different workshop right now. How wide is it? Let's find out. Yes, it's about 1200. And the height is probably,
Around 780,
yeah, that would make sense.
if you don't want it up in the menu.
Right. So now if you click the exclamation mark, it jumps to a random spot. If you started ticking, it keeps jumping. Now if you click where it says paused or normal or ticking and hold down, you'll notice there's all these options on when the script executes. So one is when you mouse down on the object. The other is when you release the mouse off of the object after you've moused down. So there's actually two different actions when you click on something, right? You mouse down and you mouse up. The other is when mouse enters the object. So when the mouse first goes over the object, and so on. So I'm going to choose mouse enter. And now when I move my cursor over the car, oh, okay, so now try to pick it up.
See, why do you want to do that? That's just mean.
So there is no way to pick it up.
That's right.
There's always a way to pick it up. You go over here, you click this white menu, and you say, grab this object. And now I've got it. Okay, so this can be part of the game. So maybe a frustrating one, but you can set things so that maybe it waits a little bit, or maybe you need to click on it before it jumps. And so, for example, let's change this to mouse up. So now when I mouse up on it, it jumps.
But before that, you can't drag it.
But I can't drag it. But I could set its coordinates wherever I want, over here. But I could make a game out of this where I have a thing called score. And my score will increase by 1. And let me keep track of my score here in this little window, this little watcher. And now every time I click on it, boom, it jumps to a random place and I increase my score. So if this were a whack-a-mole, then I'd have an interesting game. Of course, it's not very challenging when the thing sits there and waits for you to click on it. You want to set up some kind of a little timer so that it disappears or it jumps to a random spot after a certain amount of time, and we'll talk about that after a random amount of time. Okay, I think that's it for this tutorial.